Charlotte, USA, 1997. On the night of October 4th, something impossible happened inside a North Carolina cash vault. No masks, no alarms, no violence. Just one employee calmly loading $17 million into a Loomis armored van and driving away. It was the second largest cash robbery in American history. A heist that should have rewritten the rules of crime, and almost did. But buried beneath that perfect crime were secrets darker than the money they stole.
David Gant, an Army veteran and vault superintendent at Loomis Fargo, is the man who pulled off the second largest cash heist in United States history.
To understand this heist, you need to understand the man at the center of it. David wasn't a mastermind. He wasn't a career criminal. He wasn't even the kind of man who raised his voice. He was a former Army mechanic making $8 an hour, counting more money in a single shift than he would earn in a decade. People like David don't break rules. They endure them for years, quietly.
Gant was struggling in his marriage and had spent past 2.5 years working inside the Loomis cash facility.
Until something cracks. His marriage was falling apart. His savings were non-existent. His life felt small. And then she walked in. Kelly Campbell was no criminal, but she had a way of pulling people into her orbit, including David. She'd worked with him at Loomis. She knew he was quiet, lonely, easy to influence. And when she left the job, she didn't forget him, because soon after she met Steve Chambers, a small-time hustler with big-time ambitions. When Kelly mentioned David, Steve didn't just listen. He saw an opportunity. That night, she brought them together, and David never saw the danger walking toward him.
Gant later joined forces with a former Loomis coworker he'd grown close to, Kelly Campbell. She then brought in an old acquaintance, Steve Chambers, a convicted criminal and former FBI informant.
The plan was almost too simple to be real. David would take the closing shift load the vault's cash into a Loomis van and drive it straight out the back door. No gunmen, no hacking, no Hollywood tense countdown. To Kelly and Steve, it sounded clean, perfect. And to David, someone who had spent years counting money that would never be his, it sounded like the only moment in his life where he might take control. But what none of them understood was that simple plans don't stay simple. Not when greed starts rewriting the script. October 4th, 1997. 6:40 p.m. The moment David Gant crossed a line he could never return from. Inside the Loomis vault, time seemed to slow down. No alarms, no coworkers, just him and $17 million stacked in front of him. He moved with a calm that didn't feel real, loading bundles of cash into the waiting armored truck. Not a single camera was disabled. Not a single door was forced open. He simply looked up straight into the security camera and smiled. And then he drove away with the second largest cash robbery in American history. When David reached the drop-off point, he expected precision. He expected calm. He expected a crew ready to disappear into the night. But the moment Steve and his crew opened the van, they froze. They weren't expecting $5 million or $10 million. A full $17 million, more cash than any amateur crew had ever touched. And in an instant, the plan collapsed. No gloves, no discipline, no sense of control. Stacks of cash dumped on a warehouse floor. People shouting, arguing, grabbing bills like kids at a birthday party. In that moment, the perfect heist wasn't perfect anymore. It was a circus, and the clowns were running the show. Originally, David was supposed to take his share, disappear into Mexico, and never come back. But Steve had a different plan, a darker plan. As the crew panicked over the money, Steve was thinking about one thing: how to make sure David never spoke again. Within days, greed turned to paranoia. Paranoia turned to fear. Fear turned into a decision that changed everything. Steve didn't just want the money. He wanted David gone. Within days, the $17 million wasn't a secret anymore. Not in that warehouse. Not with that crew. Steve and Michelle didn't just spend the money. They exploded it. They bought cars they couldn't drive, a mansion they didn't need, and furniture so expensive they didn't even unbox it. They stuffed cash into plastic bins, hid it under beds, in the bathroom, and even handed money to strangers at parties. And the craziest part? None of it made them look richer. It just made them look guilty.
Inside, the choices were extravagant cheetah print carpeted stairs, a lavish master bath, and the notorious Velvet Elvis painting. In the driveway, a custom BMW convertible.
When Loomis Fargo finally counted the vault, the numbers didn't make sense. $17 million. Gone. No alarms, no break-ins, no damaged locks. To the FBI, that meant one thing: an inside job. And there was only one employee missing: David Scott Gaunt. By the time agents arrived, they weren't hunting ghosts. They were hunting a man who had vanished overnight. And with every hour that passed, the case only got stranger. By early 1998, everything was falling apart. Steve's paranoia was exploding. He hired a hitman to kill David. The hitman failed. He tried to reach David in Mexico. The FBI was listening. His spending got louder. His neighbors noticed, and his world was shrinking fast. On March 2nd, 1998, the FBI made their move. They raided Steve's house and found trash bags full of cash. And that same night, David Gaunt was arrested in Mexico while he was eating dinner. After 5 months on the run, the heist was finally over.
Some bills were discovered still wrapped from the vault in the home office. Steve's desk held drawers full of 20s and 50s. Agents say almost $500,000 was recovered from the desk alone.
In the months after the heist, the arrests came fast. Steve Chambers, Michelle Chambers, Kelly Campbell, and finally, David Gaunt. In total, 24 people were charged. Courtrooms filled with lawyers, reporters, and mountains of evidence. Most of the money was recovered, not all of it. Almost $2 million simply vanished and has never been found. In the end, the Loomis Fargo heist didn't collapse because of planning or police work or bad luck. It collapsed because the crew couldn't outrun their own greed.
After 5 months hiding in Mexico, David Gaunt was exhausted, almost relieved when the FBI showed up. Back in Charlotte, agents arrested Kelly Campbell, Steve and Michelle Chambers, raiding their upscale Cramerton mansion.
What started as the perfect crime ended as one of the most humiliating collapses in American history. The Loomis Fargo heist didn't just break laws, it broke people. For David Gaunt, life became a blur of interrogation rooms and prison bars. For Steve and Michelle, the fantasy of sudden wealth collapsed into guilt, suspicion, and resentment. Families were torn apart, friendships shattered, and the people who thought they were getting rich overnight lost more than money could ever buy. Because at the end of every great heist, someone pays a price far bigger than the cash. The Loomis Fargo heist didn't just end in arrests. It became a phenomenon. Documentaries, newspaper headlines, talk shows, even Hollywood. Everyone wanted a piece of the story because the heist wasn't just baffling, it was unbelievable. It was a crime so absurd, so reckless, that people couldn't stop talking about it. And today, nearly 3 decades later, the Loomis Fargo heist is remembered less like a tragedy and more like a legend, a story too strange to be fiction and too embarrassing to forget. For all the arrests and for all the recovered cash, one question has never been answered. What happened to the missing $2 million? Some believe Steve hid it before the FBI arrived. Others think members of the crew stashed it quietly, hoping to claim it years later. And there's a third theory, that the money was lost, buried, or even destroyed in the chaos of their collapse. But the truth, no one knows. And unless someone talks, the last $2 million from the Loomis Fargo heist may remain buried forever. When the courtroom lights faded and the headlines disappeared, the people behind the Loomis Fargo heist were left with the same question. What now? For David Gaunt, life after prison was simple. He remarried, found steady work, and tried to disappear from the story that made him famous. For Steve and Michelle, freedom didn't bring forgiveness or stability. And for Kelly Campbell, the woman who lit the match, her life quieted into something ordinary, almost forgettable. In the end, none of them kept the money. None of them kept the fame. What they carried out of that heist was everything they couldn't put back. In the end, the Loomis Fargo heist wasn't a story about money. It wasn't about greed or genius or even luck. It was about the fragile line between ordinary life and the moment everything collapses. One bad decision, one reckless dream, one chance to escape a life that felt too small. And for a few brief hours, they believed they'd found a way out. But the truth is simple. The money vanished, their freedom vanished, and the lives they hoped to buy never existed. This is the legacy of the Loomis Fargo heist, a story of ordinary people chasing an extraordinary fantasy and losing everything in the process. Beat, quiet, almost a whisper, because the greatest cost of a crime isn't the punishment, it's what you can never get back.